I'm extremely delighted and honored to welcome Professor M.K. Sridhar, an eminent educationist thinker, an education administrator, as well as an education policymaker. All three in one. And for those of us who have been part of the Parivar, Professor M.K. Sridhar has been a very dear elder, has been someone who has been very patiently guiding us at various stages, who comes across not only as sagacious, but as someone who can always and perennially identify with the aspiration of young India. And I think that is what, to the rank and file, makes Professor M.K. Sridhar stand apart from many others. So I'm extremely delighted that as a very distinguished and eminent member of the National Education Policy Drafting Committee, he has kindly, at a very short notice, he has agreed, he consented to join and to deliver a special address on the National Education Policy. Friends, by introducing the speaker, our speaker first, it was this, the first part was a very personal introduction, but the official introduction, it's my privilege to introduce him. M.K. Sridhar obtained Doctor of Philosophy from the University of Mysore. He was a senior lecturer in commerce at Vijaya College, Bangalore, and later served as professor and dean at Canara Bank School of Management Studies, Bangalore University. He has successfully guided 4 MPhil, 11 PhD scholars, published 30 papers, and completed 11 research projects. He's a trainer and a social activist for social and national causes. For many of us who know him, know this only too well. His life sketch was published as a book entitled Sahasrapadi. He was profiled as an achiever by a few newspapers and TV channels. He was conferred with Karnataka Rajyotsava Award by Government of Karnataka and General President Gold Medal by Indian Science Congress Association. He served as Member Secretary of Karnataka Knowledge Commission and Karnataka State Innovation Council, Government of Karnataka. And he has been a very dear colleague with me as member of the Central Advisory Board of Education, MHRD. Recently, he served as a member of a committee of the Committee for Drafting the National Education Policy under the chairmanship of Dr. K. Kasturirangan and chairman of Expert Committee on Technology Enabled Learning of the Government of Karnataka. Presently, he is the Executive Council member of Central University of Kerala, President of Center for Educational and Social Studies, CES, Yuvaka Sangha, member of University Grants Commission, as well as ICSSR Senior Fellow at ISEC Bangalore. And especially this, very recently, just a few days ago, he was appointed as member of the UGC as well. So I'm extremely happy to welcome him. Now, friends, I just wanted to give a very brief, I just wanted to set the theme very briefly, because we're all gathered here and I see a number of friends who have joined in, mainly educationists, professors, principals of colleges from across the country who have joined us, as well as others who are extremely educationists themselves who want to push the narrative at the grassroots and much below. I want to remind you briefly of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address on 7th August 2020 on the National Education Policy, in which Professor Sridhar also was present. And I just want to mention 2 or 3 fundamental points Modi made in his very crucial and historic address on explaining the National Education Policy. He said that the National Education Policy focuses on the education and skills needed for the youth of the 21st century India. It will lay the foundation of the new India the 21st century India. And Prime Minister Modi keeps talking about the 21st century being the Indian century, being India's century. A very interesting point he made was that this education policy focuses and attempts and strives to ensure that our youth develop critical and innovative thinking. And then he says, if there is no passion for education, if an education has no philosophy, then what is the purpose of that education? Friends, having grown up in Sri Aurobindo Ashram, having studied in the Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education in Pondicherry in my formative years, I can conclusively tell you that this national education policy completely synergizes, completely symbolizes and represents the fundamentals of educational thinking that our great educationists of the past, starting from Swami Vivekananda to Sri Aurobindo and the entire gamut in between, had aspired for a free India. And that is how we need to look at this policy. It is a policy which aims to look at education and approach education from a holistic rather than from a piecemeal point of view. And what a beautiful description Prime Minister gives when he says, we have to make our students global citizens. Simultaneously, we also have to keep in mind that they stay connected to their roots. Our education thinkers, our educational philosophers, our educationists of the past who imagined the narrative of a free India continuously harped on this aspect as well. And this education policy, as Prime Minister says, aims to reduce the burden of unnecessary syllabus and books, and it aims to teach students with an inquiry-based, with a discovery-based, discussion-based, and analysis-based ways. I think this is a fascinating description Prime Minister makes, and we have one of the architects of this policy in front of us. And I think that is, knowing him, one can very well understand how this education policy has come about to be what it is. The largest democratic exercise, one of the biggest and widest dialogic-based policy formulation. And I think when in the course of years down the line, when the history of India's education, the history of India's education will be written again. The National Education Policy 2020, the manner in which it was made, the manner in which it was articulated, and the manner in which it is eventually going to be implemented is going to occupy a very central place in that history. Friends, I would like to now hand over the forum to Professor M.K. Sridharji, and I would like to welcome him amidst us today. And I'm also happy to note that Sri Sajinarayan ji, National President of Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, has also joined us. Welcome, namaste and welcome, sir. He has continuously, and I must say that Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation has had the fortune of receiving his guidance. He has continuously encouraged us, especially on the NEP. He has been very proactive. And as Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee throughout his life ensured, he never divested education and his political activism. He synergized both in his life, and till the last days, he was an active educational administrator, an active educational thinker, and someone who envisaged the future of India's education in a manner in which this policy reflects largely. Professor M.K. Sridhar, I would like to kindly invite you to address the gathering.
Before I start, can you just give me the profile of the people who are here so that I'll get an idea of, you know,
Yes,
a general profile, you know, that
yes,
will help
yes,
me to,
yes.
because
So
I
the
should
profile,
have
as I
thought.
said, yes, the profile, as I said, we have primarily people here who are involved with education, who are themselves educationists, head of institutions or teachers or professors, as well as people who keep an interest in public policy, and also karyakartas of our larger system, and as well as personalities such as Saji Narayanji. This is the composition of the gathering today.
सबको नमस्कार. And very nice that Dr. Anirban Shyam Prakash Mukherjee Research Foundation has made all of us to come together and spend some time and looking at the kind of profile of people who have come here. That's why I asked Dr. Anirban about the profile of people, you know, because uh, all of you are so experienced, not necessarily in education, but in life, public life. I think it's my pleasure and privilege to spend some time, not to share much, but interact with all. So, accordingly, what I will also do is, I think because you would have known a lot of things about this, and there is a lot of coverage in the media, and people have been talking around. So, what I would like to do is very briefly, I will introduce the policy to you. I will not get into greater details, but maybe in the course of the interaction, when you raise your questions or clarifications or whatever it is, I think we can do that. Maybe up to 4:45 we can go. Is that fine? Okay. As all of you know, after independence, apart from the present one, there were only two policies as national policy. One is based on the recommendations of Kothari Commission, that was 1968, and then in 1986. See, Kothari Commission, or rather 1968 policy, is based on the report of Kothari Commission, whereas 1986, it was not based on anybody's report. There was a document called Challenge of Education, and that Challenge of Education was discussed, was released, and then based on the inputs to that, the policy was made in-house. Means in-house means the concerned ministry and bureaucrats. I'm not finding it, I'm just giving a background, that's all. I'm not trying to make any coloring of anything. But this 86 policy was again site modifications were done, and that was called 1992 Plan of Action, POA of 86. They made some little changes. After 86, then lot of things happened, but there was no policy. When the present NDA government under the leadership of Dr. Modi ji came, 2014, I think by the later part of 2014, and even the manifesto had clearly mentioned that they will come out with a national policy on education. So therefore, accordingly, the entire process started in 2015 when Srimati Smriti Irani was the Minister for HRD. So what they did is, this is a very interesting exercise which I would like to share with you. One is Kothari Commission report. They did consult and they met people, etc. But it was more an expert educationist point of view which resulted in policy. 1986 is a result of a document that government prepared and asked people to respond to that document. Based on that document, a response, they formulated a policy in-house. In this case, in the case of the present one, 2020 policy, the consultation and the kind of suggestions that were taken, it is so widespread and large. I can call this as the first bottom-up approach of any government in India with regard to education. The first real bottom-up. Why I am saying this? January 2015, it's when it started. You know, the ministry did a little interesting. I think. Hello. Okay. That is.
There's some echo. I would request everyone to please, Tirumai Kumarji, please switch off your, please mute yourself. Ji, yes, sir. You can please continue.
Okay. What they did is, they identified 20 themes in higher education and 13 themes in school education. For every theme, they gave a bit of introduction. And in the light of that introduction, that theme, they raised some questions. So what they did is, when they went in consultation, these questions were asked and asked people to respond. This is the first mechanism that they followed. And they did it from Gram Panchayat to a very highest level, expert group, so many things. So up to October, this process went on, MyGov and different platforms, all that they did. Then they appointed a committee, and that was headed by TSR Subramaniam, former cabinet secretary. And he did not present a draft policy, but he presented what is called as evolution of policy, report on the evolution of policy. That happened in May 2016. Later on, there was little lull because there was change in minister and all that. But the process was on because a lot of discussion happened. 2017 June, Kasturangan committee was appointed. And we finalized the report in 2018 December, but could be submitted only by last after the new government took over. After submission, it was put on public domain, and you will be happy to note we received something like 1,70,000 suggestions on the draft report. If you want, I have the details, the kind of coloring that we did, all that we did all that exercise. And then it was vetted internally for a long time. Finally, this came. Why I wanted to share this piece was when we say bottom up, it was kind of all stakeholders. Because I can keep on going, giving detail, but I don't want to. This is one piece that I would like to share with you, number one. Number two, after 86 policy, major developments happened in our country, especially in our context. One is the 91, that globalization, that kind of a, P.V. Narasimha Rao time, there was a crisis, all that, a lot of things happened. And then internet revolution happened in the meanwhile. And thirdly, Right to Education Act was brought in 2009. It is called RTA, Right to Education Act. And then constitutional amendment was also done. So all these things happened between 86 and 2020. So therefore, it is also commencement of 21st century, and also the kind of scenario in the world and the position of our country in the world has also undergone change. There is a new kind of leadership in our country. All these things necessitated completely different approach, and I can just say that somehow everybody was feeling, it is time to send off the lock, stock, and barrel, the baggage that we had, and we need to embrace a new system which will definitely consider our own. Let me come to some specifics of the policy. One is it touches early childhood care to higher education, all the dimensions, vertical. And horizontally, if you take, starting from school education, vocational education, general education, medical, agriculture, all that, whatever you call as education has been covered. Technology, adult education, and then Indian culture, language, arts, everything under the broad framework of education has been covered. Whether something comes under Ministry of HRD or not, it was covered. And what we felt was, when we went into the process, few things what we felt is, somehow our education system, somehow I think we are working in a completely rigid, centralized, and the uniform mania, the mindset of uniformity. I think that was the characteristic. You were only having all kinds of restriction. You can't do this, you can't do that. And there was a tremendous control mechanism, on education. So therefore, all these things, and there is a legacy of Macaulay system, all that is fine. I don't want to get into that little issues like that. So what we felt is, the student is not the center of the entire system. See, the student was not the center, and the institutions which impart education was not empowered. And the teachers were completely ignored their role. So considering all these things, what we did is, it required a completely a different, approach and a new look. Like New India, it required a new education system. So I will only say a very basic 2, 3 points, then open out for discussion. One is the entire school education. We looked at a whole lot in an integrated manner. Anirban, you were telling, you were a student of Sri Aurobindo who talked about integral education, And in that fashion, what we did is, education was starting only from the age of 6 in our country till now. Education means starting itself was 6. So what we did is, it will now onwards, it will start in the age of 3. So 3 to 18 years, 15 years is school education. And that 15 years has been completely the education philosophy, the curriculum, and the pedagogy is based on age appropriate cognitive, emotional, motor skill development. It's completely based on research and our own traditions. So what we do is, this 15 years of school education, we put them into 4 phases. The first 5 years, next 3 years, next 3 years, and last 4 years. So we call this as 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. Till now in our country, 10 plus 2 plus 3, I think you're all familiar. And this came in 1968 policy that continued for such a long time. 10 plus 2 plus 3. 10 years in that primary, upper primary, and secondary. But there was nothing like that kind of a very distinct philosophy like that. It was not there. It was not articulated, rather. So 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 is what is taken. The first stage, it's a combination of early childhood care and grade 1 and grade 2. The first 3 years, grade 3, 4, 5. The next 3 years, 6, 7 grade. And the last 4 years, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And here, your vocational education, your diploma, all that will be under the same roof of school education. There will not be any other streams, only under school education. And it is completely well thought. In the interaction, if you want, we can go into the details. And he thought in the secondary education, last 4 years, we must have a choice for students. That is, and you need to introduce them to more and more subjects. Otherwise, from 11th grade onward, people are getting into classifications. Instead of that, we thought that we need to have a broader perspective. And when students come into undergraduation, so until the completion of 12th grade, no specialization. It is broad exposure to them as much as possible. So then the child will reach 18 years of age. Then we thought that it is time to introduce semi-specialization. You're introducing the concept of specialization. So in undergraduation, which will be 3 or 4 years, there will be semi-specialization in the form of the usual art, science, commerce kind of a artificial division of knowledge has been given a go by. Knowledge is an integrated law. and I will try to work around. So students will opt for major or minor combinations, and students will pursue that undergraduation will be for 3 or 4 years. And after undergraduation, depending upon how many years that they do, 3 or 4, whatever it is, there will be masters and PhD. And this entire higher education is treated as lifelong learning concept. Lifelong and experiential learning concept. Let me come to some more details of this undergraduation, then stop. Undergraduation, unfortunately, is the highest number in our country. Not unfortunately, sorry. Fortunately, highest number, but unfortunately, quality is bad. Okay, that is what I meant. 80% of our student enrollment in our country, around 3 crores, 40 lakhs, something like that. 85% are in that general undergraduate program. Because undergraduate program is not up to the mark, people go to masters. Because the quality is not good, people go to PhD. Or one masters is not good, they go for another masters. They keep on taking the competitive examination, or they will search whatever it is. So what we are saying is undergraduation program of higher education has to be made very, very value driven. Then for many of the people, more than 50% of the enrollment, that undergraduation can become a terminal course. They can come out and pursue whatever they want. If they any time that they want to come back, they can always do that. So it was said multiple entry and multiple exit. This the other day, Honorable Prime Minister was referring to this multiple entry and multiple exit. That is very much connected to lifelong learning. We were actually, friends, in our country, we were looking at students as robots. Once they enter the course, you'll have to complete everything. And until you complete 3 years and do all that, you will not get anything. That was the approach. So here it is flexible. After first year of completion, you will get a certificate. Second year, a diploma. Third year, a degree. And if you want to pursue fourth year, that will be with research. But at the same time, that research, if you pursue, then you can go. That is primarily for those who take up further education, further education. So this entire higher education is multidisciplinary. Large colleges and universities. Universities will be free from affiliation system, and school education, the teachers only have one thing, that is 4-year integrated B.Ed program. No diplomas and things like that. So this is broadly the per se of education policy. Maybe as and when you ask me few things, I will start explaining. I thought I only gave you something which is the soul of education. There are any number of regulatory aspects and like that we can discuss over.
Thank you so much. I think it couldn't have been the all the aspects that you explained. I think it couldn't have been more lucid. And this compact group, which is part of this discussion, I'm sure at least I was, and I could understand a few others also were taking notes on what you were saying, because we from the foundation has started a series of outreach on the NEP. You were present the day Prime Minister appealed to everyone to take the discussion to the grassroots. And I think we have started doing that with a focus obviously on West Bengal to start with. Now, if I may start with 3 points that I had, which I wanted to put before you, and the others, I would request all our other friends who have joined us to put in your comments in the box. Then I would request if Sundaramji is with us, national convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch. I would request Sajinarayanji also. Yes. So I would request then Sundaramji, Sajinarayanji to also come in with their observations. And then I had noticed also Sri Shakti Sinha, our very eminent public policy expert, director of the Atal Bihari Vajpayee School for International Relations and Policy, also there. He could also come in at a certain point. Now, I had 3 points. One is that I would like you to slightly also speak a little more on teachers training in the national education policy, because Prime Minister speaks about recovering the dignity of teachers. He uses that specific phrase, dignity of teachers, and it is very important because all our great educationists were themselves teachers also, and they were also very concerned about how would an independent and free India approach the training of teachers. One. Two is the language aspect, because that is something which is, on and off. In the last few days there have been elements which have tried to misinterpret or interpret it in their own way, especially in the context of West Bengal. Many here, my colleagues, my friends are here from West Bengal. They have seen how perhaps the government of West Bengal, I mean, I'm not getting into that discussion, but I'm just saying that it is, I think, the only state government which has already appointed a committee to examine the national education policy. Whereas Prime Minister is inviting everyone to tell us how this can be further worked out and implemented. So the language aspect, then a very interesting section which is there is this concept of bagless days, and where Prime Minister asks this: how is it that the idea of high and low and mocking stance towards people who engage in the labor has crept into our minds? I think this bagless days, vocational hand work, I think this is an extremely important part. I would like you to please shed some more light which we can absorb and then speak about later. And the last point from my side is in this lot about the autonomy. There also the policy has clearly come spoken of it, autonomy of institutions, educational institution, and Prime Minister also has made a point. What is that formulation which we, on this point of autonomy for higher education institution, what is the stand and formulation that we should actually go and tell people or speak to them? This was my point. Thank you.
Suppose while answering, if I miss anything, you please remind me on it.
Yes,
One
yes,
of
absolutely.
about the teachers. So the teachers, I think the very important thing that we addressed in school education as well as higher education. In fact, in the draft policy of that 484 pages, what we had submitted, in both sections, we had one chapter for teachers. Second thing, what we felt is when it is a question of teachers, we looked not just into the qualification, the whole gamut of teachers are teacher related issues. For example, let me tell you the kind of facilities that are available to the teachers, starting from that. I can give an example. Now, for example, we said in rural areas, in rural schools, is there a functioning toilet for the lady teachers? That kind of a point that we have made. So before either finding fault or putting the teachers to task, etc., we need to look at, have we given all that what they deserve? And in that dimension, non-educational and non-academic activities, how they must be free, and how they must be recruited, how they must be placed, how they must be given transfer, how they must be given promotion. Along with all this and their professional development, along with all this, we also look at the qualification. So the point what you just now raised and the point what our Prime Minister raised in his address, that teachers are given extremely important position in the entire policy. But you know what happens? See, let me give you an example. One is the toilet, all that I said. See, the transfer of a teacher, it should not be very frequent. This point we have said. Why? We are not talking from only the teacher's angle. We are also talking from the community end. So if a teacher comes to a school, a primary school or wherever it is, I'm talking more in the public system, then within no time, if the teacher is transferred, then that continuity is lost. And what is the teacher-pupil ratio? That also we have said. See, for example, 1:30 is general ratio that people say. But especially in those areas, in such of those schools, where socially, economically disadvantaged sections are there, we should not aim at 1:30. We must bring it down to 1:25. So like that we have looked at. So therefore, teachers are being given completely important place. In addition, we also talked about continuous professional development. For example, in any school, 50 hours of continuous professional development is compulsory for every teacher in every year on voluntary basis. Whatever that you would like to take, you can always take. And technology is also made available. And especially with regard to qualification, this 1-year business, 2-year business, diploma business, all that is being removed. And we have said 4-year integrated B.Ed in a multidisciplinary scenario, which will come under the purview of higher education. That is being suggested. But there is a existing B.Ed and all is there. There is a transition time for all that. So teacher is one important piece. I think, hope I explained that. The second point, what you said, sorry, maybe I get lost while explaining.
No problem. The second point I said was the language aspect.
Okay. With regard to language, one is the mother tongue, local language, free language formula. That part I will come back. But the very important thing that we have advocated in the policy is multilingualism. That is our advantage. No country has the advantage of having so many languages and our own Indian languages. Somehow, we need to make use of this opportunity to promote more and more languages and make the children to learn and pick up, if not great knowledge, but at least pick up as many languages as possible. I have a very interest with me, which is based on neurological research, and it says, even Dr. Kasturirangan explained this to some of the MPs from Tamil Nadu. When they raised all kinds of things when we had interaction in Delhi, what he said is, and it is based on that scientific research, when a child picks up more languages, the enzymes in the brain get more activated. And if they get more activated, it will contribute to the cognitive development in a fast track mode. This is what he said. And I have a slide. If you want, I can share with you later on. That shows, the multilingualism is one very important thing that we have said here, which is a combination of local language, mother tongue, regional language, home language, national language, international language, and classical language. All this put together has been given, and it is being said, we need to promote as many languages as possible. I think we need to look at, in this context, the three-language formula in letter and spirit that everybody knows that we have recommended. But one thing what we have said is, in the policy, up to the grade 5, as far as possible, the medium of instruction has to be mother tongue, local language, home language, regional language, is what we said. Preferably up to grade 8. So this is what I said. But all other three-language formula, everything is there. And after 8th, 9th and 10th onwards, it can be bilingual. But if possible, the state government will have to take a stand, because you cannot have a uniform system everywhere. And because of the constitution provision also, you cannot impose any language. And we have spent long points with regard to promotion of Indian language, Sanskrit, and all other things. And there is a National Institute of Translation and things like that. And classical languages. Sanskrit we have presented is classical, no doubt, but very, very modern. Classical language, but with very modern relevance, kind of an approach that we have taken. This is about language. And the third is the
bagless days the concept, and the last is autonomy of educational institutions.
Bagless days. The bagless days, there are a lot of choice given in curriculum, etc., in school. Instead of reducing the size of the book and kinds of things like that, what we have done is, the child must have a connect with the local society. See, you should not take away the child away from society. In fact, we have used the term, school must be सामाजिक चेतना केंद्र होना चाहिए. We have used this term in the policy. School must become सामाजिक चेतना केंद्र. So the child must have that connect. So therefore, 10 days every year, have an internship. The child goes out into the village or wherever it would like to go. It will interact with the local people. See, somebody is weaving, the child will go and meet. And like that, it has been done. So that number one, bagless days is one thing, vocational exposure is second, and connect with the local context, local people is third. And also very, very important thing is, the moment that the child gets education, it should never look down at others in the society. So that exposure must be there. And the last point, when it comes to autonomy, see, autonomy, let me not expand too much. There are three dimensions of autonomy. One is academic, second is administrative, third is financial. Financial, whether it is there in our hands or not, I don't know. But administrative and academic. What we have said is, all higher educational institutions, there are only universities and colleges. they'll be free from affiliation system. So the universities will have complete autonomy. They will have independent board of governors. Independent board of governors, and the entire planning has to be based on institutional development plan. And you'll have to choose your board and things like that. And when it comes to the question of the colleges will not be affiliated. Over a period of time, they will be made autonomous. And once you reach a stage of autonomy, you will also get degree granting powers. And there will be no centralized imposition of any syllabus. There is only a curricular framework that will be prepared. And based on that curricular framework, every university, every college will develop their own courses. They will develop their own combinations. They will develop their own approaches. See, for example, it can be a combination of vocational, skill, competence, your own local context. Anything that you want, you can bring it. So therefore, in the entire policy, autonomy is to respect diversity, is also to respect the local context.
I think this is extremely clear, especially all the points, and especially the last point, which you have so beautifully put it, that like respect the local context, and I think these, I mean, these have been so central to our debates, educational debates, but no attempt has been made to seriously take this forward. So can I, because we have time, and because this is a very serious group, can I then invite Sajinarayan ji to just come forward with some observations on the national education policy? After that, I request Sundaram ji to come forward and make some observations. And then we have Dr. Malini Bhattacharya also, who's here. I would request her also later on to make some observations. Saji ji.
Thank you, Nirbanji. First of all, I should thank Sridharji, Professor Sridharji, for becoming a part of a historical effort. This is after, I think, after Kothari Commission report. This is the first time a fundamental, basic change of vision is taking place in the education sector. So I congratulate you being a part of such a great Himalayan effort. Now, when we look at the whole affair, what is the vision conveyed by the new NEP, this NEP? I think there are many things you have mentioned from what I have gathered in my mind from many discussions that have already taken up. One is an Indianizing effect is coming first time, because after Macaulay's time, this is the first time an Indianizing effort has taken place. Second is vocationalizing the education, because skill training is a very great challenge, and everybody says whatever the government has done efforts for the last several years, it is not going for a takeoff stage. It is all running in the runway, but not taking off. Only if it is related to academic sector, then only skill development will be in a large scale that will take care of the needs. So vocationalizing also is a great thing. And third thing is a sort of the students' inquisitive faculty is being developed, given more importance. A sort of analytical skills, research is given prominence. So these are all some of the highlights of this thing. So for that purpose, it is going to be a great historic document, everything. Now, when so I don't want to go into what you have said and commenting on those. But I mean, the discussion, there are some reservation about this thing. I want some clarification on that, because you are the most relevant authority for all of us, because we have been right from the beginning. You know each and every clause, full stop, comma you have studied. So only that I think that is I want to this thing. One is for personality development. That is that is there is a squarely what Swami Vivekananda said about education. So it should develop the manifestation of divinity in man, or all those things. It is there. So what is the personality development content in the NEP? Second thing is many times many people say that the success of this NEP depends on the content making. That is what is remains. So what way this content making process that has been secured in this exercise. Another thing already Anirbanji has said that from affiliation system to autonomy, that shifting, how can it be a little bit standardization is required? How it is taken care of? Because standardization, if you leave everything to the concerned college, the levels of different colleges may differ. So how that can be standardized, that is there. Another thing is the yardstick between public and private institutions. This is also become the thing how you look at that thing. Another aspect is unchecked commercialization is promoted by this NEP. That is one allegation. This corporate entities will be there, privatization will be there. Public, the role of public institutions, especially in rural area, without public funded institution, India cannot move forward rural education. So whether that will be affected by this thing, what are the precautions taken on that aspect? Then the decision making has been more centered in the executive bureaucracy. Even the parliament or state government, their powers are being now given to bureaucracy. This thing. This how that is there. That can be there. Even more than academia, it is the bureaucrats who are going to run these institutions. So how you are looking at this thing. Then vocationalization that you have started a new direction, but the details of vocationalization that is not there in the report. So in what way that is there? Another thing is the English medium is not, it starts only at a later stage, English study. But many parents in the urban areas, semi-urban areas, they are all very much worried about this aspect, because in a state like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, where English is more prominent than other languages, there it is the parents are little worried. They want even in the pre-primaries is filled with English studies. So that is there. Then another thing is, you have explained already, there multiple entry and exit. This system, whether it will create a anarchy in education. This is a question that is raised. Another question is postdoctoral studies, that is not given importance in the report. Postdoctoral studies, is it true? It's a question of fact. Is it true, or what you have said about this? Then another thing is, all these changes are taking place at the primary level, pre-primary level, higher education level. How far these changes will going to affect the teachers? The teachers who are working there, because their salary, their promotion chances, their today's working system, burden, everything, how those things will be affected. And lastly, I would like to ask almost all the yes, this 6% for education. This is the 1962 demand. 1960, I think Sridharji has. Sridharji, you are hearing? Okay. 1962. So is it suitable for the current perspective? We are living in 2020. So these are some of the reservations which we have heard while I have participated in many discussions on NEP. So these are some. So I would like to hear directly from the horse's mouth these things. With this words, I conclude. Thank you. Thank you once again for being a part of this historical endeavor. Thank you.
Very nice of you, I think, by raising so many questions. I am also getting an opportunity to ऐसा मैं भी कर रहा हूँ ऐसा I think thank you very much. With regard to personality development, especially school education, we have said a very important principle. Curricular, co-curricular and extracurricular, there will be no walls. Everything is curricular. So you are actually promoting all dimensions of personality from day one. This is one thing. Second thing, even when it comes to question of higher education, see the entire concept of 3 or 4 years without any segregation of science, arts, commerce kind of a thing. You can pick up anything, different combinations in the form of major and minor. See, for example, I'll give an example. If somebody is studying physics as a major, in the present context, the fellow can never go out of physics or science. But in this, you can take any kind of minor, so that freedom is there. And when it comes to the school, there is an interesting part which will take care of the personality development. The report card of each student is based on 360-degree appraisal of the student. First time in our country, the report card will consist of a report on which skill the student is strong. And for this sake, artificial intelligence will also be brought in. So like this, all these dimensions, primarily giving choice to the student, giving students a place to pursue their passion. इसलिए मैं एक वाक्य में इस पॉलिसी को मैं एक दिन पहले जो कुछ सेशन में मैं भाग ले रहा था, वहां मैंने बोला कि ये पॉलिसी आई दिमाग को एड्रेस करता है और दिल को भी एड्रेस करता है. That is the kind of approach. With regard to content making, we have said that national curriculum framework will come out by 2021. NCERT will first come out with a national curriculum framework for early childhood care and education, because first time an effort is being made. And we have taken care to say all local traditions, Indian approaches have to be done and all that. And then it is not syllabus, sir. Let me tell you, curricular framework is not syllabus, it's not curriculum. It's a framework, basic principles and what is to be done. Then on that basis, the textbooks will be written, and the textbooks will also always be, even though they may be developed by NCERT and national bodies, but there is a percentage that states can change, a percentage that districts can change, a percentage that local context can be brought. So that's why the entire curriculum, there is an approach for national approach, and there is also a great provision for local context. Affiliation system, what you said, what about the standardization? The affiliation system, even though we have said By 2035, it has to be removed completely. It can happen little early also. What will happen is the colleges will have to become multidisciplinary on one hand and then little bigger in size on the other. Now what we are having is any number of small colleges dispersed everywhere offering one single program. Let me give an example. 40% of the colleges in our country, they offer only one program. Only one program. 26% of the colleges, they have enrollment of less than 50. Less than 50 in a college. So they are not viable. So if you want to bring about that college atmosphere and if you have to make it little effective, size is one thing and multidisciplinarity is another. So like that it will start, and even this autonomy, it will not be given zero autonomy, 100% autonomy. No, it will be called graded autonomy. That means degrees of autonomy will be given over a period of time. You will be given some autonomy, then you will be seen how you perform, then you will be given the next grade, then the next grade. And finally, when you go for grading, when you get the highest grade, then only you will be given the degree granting power. And this entire thing is based on accreditation. It is not based on some visit of some people and some members going and visiting. It is completely based on accreditation system, and that framework will be developed by National Accreditation Agency, NAC, National Accreditation Council. With regard to public and private, what we have said is the regulation and other norms are equally applicable to public or private. No differentiation. At the same time, they will be they'll be subjected to light but tight regulation. You will not control everything, but you will identify the critical components of regulation and you will go very hard on that. For example, auditing is one issue. The second is public disclosure of whatever you do. Third is transparency. All these things will come in, and only on that basis, and your accreditation, things like that will be the basis. Then commercialization. See, no doubt I have also seen people saying, commercialization will happen. See, the entire policy very clearly says that education is for public good, commercial privatization, no. In school education as well as in higher education, we have our emphasis on how to strengthen public institutions. For example, government schools. We have said there is a system called school complex, school cluster, and the quality of the government school must improve. The learning outcomes of government school must improve. It is not mere continuation of the government school. So that's why commercialization, and there is a complete accountability mechanism that we have brought, that the regulatory mechanism will brought. And the bureaucracy, I don't think that bureaucracy will also have any role, because every institution will be governed by independent board of governors without any external interference. And even if some funding and things like that happen, it is based on institutional development plan. See, for example, every institution will always prepare for every year, this is what is my plan for the year. And that plan will be discussed and accepted And next year, when a review happens, it is always with reference to the plan that is being given, not on any ad hoc basis. Then occasionalization, no doubt that great details are not there, but the principles are given. That is, occasionalization is not separate, it is part and parcel of school education and higher education. It has been brought into a mainstream, not a separate system. And then the English medium, see, what we have said is this is the recommendation of the policy. Wherever possible, you offer mother tongue up to fifth grade 5, preferably up to 8. And naturally, we have very clearly said in the policy, no language is imposed. Out of 22 languages as per Schedule 8, the 3 language formula comes into picture, and it is for the state governments to take a policy to decide what kind of a thing happens. But one thing what I am looking forward, the kind of decentralization that we have started in this policy through school complex, 15, 20 schools coming together and coming as a school complex. I think that decentralization will be more and more in the days to come. I think many of these language related issues can also be settled because you need to take a decision in a micro unit, not in a bigger unit. And then entry exit, multiple entry exit, whether it will create anarchy. No, in fact, it is completely will be based on credit system. There will be an academic bank of credit. When somebody enters and when somebody exits, that bank of credit will be there, and on that basis only it will happen. And one thing what I would like to say is the entire bodies will come out with national higher education qualification framework. National higher education qualification framework, which will give complete framework for all these things. So therefore, that will not go anywhere. Postdoctoral, what you said, it is only a mechanism. If somebody wants to do it, it is always possible. You know, tenure track mechanism, what we have said, especially for higher educational institution, we have said tenure track and then extended tenure track. There you can always bring in postdoctor. We might not, the policy might not have used the term postdoctoral, but it amounts to same. Then about teachers, you said you had an apprehension, whether it will disturb and things like that. This 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, whatever that we have said, we have very clearly stated in the policy, this should not affect the physical infrastructure of the schools. This is only at the education level, but this is not to divide and send that school that way, bring this here. So the teachers will not be disturbed. And lastly, 6% of GDP, what you said. In fact, the draft report, whatever that we have submitted, Kasturirangan committee, we have actually deviated from this percentage of GDP business. We have actually made it as outlay. In every year, total public outlay, what should be the percentage for education? It is around 10% today, and we have recommended to take it to 20% over a period of next 10 years. So every year that 1% has to be increased. But when finally when the policy was announced, it was restricted to 6% of GDP. But one silver line what I have is, even if it is 6%, in fact, Dr. Kasturirangan has written in the preface to that report, 6% of 3 trillion economy, 6% of 5 trillion economy, 6% of 10 trillion economy makes lot of difference. And it is said that whatever we have calculated, even 6% of 10 trillion economy is more than enough for education. Our economy, as and when it grows, the rate remaining same, the percentage remaining same, but the quantity available will be more. So that is the kind of approach. I hope I answered all the.
Wonderful. I think this has become a very interesting dialogue. I mean, I think this is exactly. I wish many more had joined, but I also want to say that this is being done live, and we are recording this entire proceeding to be able to then push it through the social media across the country. So nothing is lost in the sense, but the manner in which the questions were asked, the manner in which you have answered, I think this is fascinating. It's getting into a very interesting dialogue. And I'm really very delighted that such seniors have given their time and they are here with us. So I want to then now, as we are nearing the end, I want to say Professor Kanak Sabapati also has joined, member ICSSR, and also lately Vice President of Tamil Nadu BJP. But his identity is that of an educationist, of a thinker, of a social activist also. So welcome, sir. I would request Sri Sundaramji to kindly come in here with your observations. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Anirban, for making me part of this very enlightening discussion this afternoon. In fact, Professor Sridhar has made a very hot afternoon in Madurai, 3:30, a very pleasant one. My previous speaker, my best friend Sajid Narayanan, made Sridhar give another second speech. So I was searching for questions, but I am not able to ask anything. But the only thing I want to join Anirban Ganguly, that the situation in Tamil Nadu. Now the anti-Hindi mood in Tamil Nadu has outlived its utility. Today morning, a reporter was stating to me, out of 1 crore 20 lakh students today, 60 lakh students have the option of studying a third language even today. So it is going to be a battle between the society and some self-styled saviors of Tamil or something. I think this new education policy will definitely change the face of Tamil Nadu, and I see the Tamil Nadu joining the national mainstream in the next 1 or 2 years. So this is the major advantage I look at from this policy. I have nothing to ask. I have no more questions to ask because I have already enlightened everything. Like Bengal, the Tamil Nadu Sangha Parivar organization, Tamil Nadu should also take more efforts in taking this policy the look and corner of the state. That is the need of the hour. Thank you very much, Anirban. Thank you very much.
Thank you as always. Thank you. Yes.
I have a small response to what Sundaramji said.
Yes, please.
I feel the kind of approach that is taken standard policy with regard to language must be used as a very good opportunity to push this.
Kanak Sabapati ji, your mic has to be switched off. There's an echo. Yes, please.
The kind of stand and the approach that the policy has taken with regard to language, I think it is an opportunity for us to go little aggressive and bring that kind of a narrative in Tamil Nadu also. In fact, let me recollect that incident what Dr. Kasturirangan interacted with MPs from Tamil Nadu, that Karthik Chidambaram, Kanmozi, no? Karunanidhi's daughter. When all these people in a very Kanimozi, something, Kanimozi. See, when they were very vociferous and things like that, Kasturiranganji asked one question. I appreciate it or don't appreciate whatever you are saying is fine. But what right you have in preventing your children from learning more languages? What right you have, you tell me. We are only saying, give them the opportunity. Don't prevent it. For the sake of your own children, don't prevent. Like that he said. Just hearing that.
Now, both Karthik Chidambaram and Kavimuni, they speak fluent Hindi. This is for your information.
No, so that is why I was wanting to say that when Sundaramji says that this anti-Hindi politics is a post-dated check,
Yes.
it is evident that from the beaches of from mass meetings in Marina, it has now shifted to Chennai airport with CISF. That entire, so it shows how it is actually become post-dated. So before I come towards the end, since Professor Kanak Sabapati ji has joined, I would also request him to make briefly a few observations. Then I will request Dr. Malini Bhattacharya, who is also a young academic based out of Bangalore, who is extensively written also, and she is herself a very active educationist, to also make her few observations. Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Anibandi, for this special talk. And my congratulations, all our congratulations to the team, Professor Sridharji and Dr. Kasturi Rangan others. This is an excellent national educational policy. We all wholeheartedly welcome it. As Sundaramji mentioned, in Tamil Nadu, we are encountering a serious issue now, for which we are working at the ground level. We are trying to get response from people, and we are trying to get signatures and all. But overall, Tamilians welcome this national education policy. As you were mentioning, there are around 300 schools run by these DMK leaders themselves, all CBSE schools offering Hindi. So, but they don't want others to study. And all MLAs, MPs, their family, children, they are all studying in Hindi schools only, medium schools only, offering Hindi. But they don't want others to study. But people have understood largely. And even today, when we are taking details, we come to know there are hundreds of schools that are offering 3 languages in Tamil Nadu. They offer, Telugu, they offer Kannada, they offer Urdu. And in Chennai, there is a school that teaches students only through Urdu medium. There is no Tamil. So we are exposing all these anomalies in the Tamil Nadu education system. But I hope that people will be able to understand. We have started a month-long movement for this. The entire Parivar, including BJP, our people are working on the ground. So this is an opportunity for Tamilians also to understand the importance. As all of you may be knowing, Tamil Nadu is perhaps the only state where huge number of students enroll themselves for Hindi in the Dakshin Bharat Hindi Prachar Sabha. So this is what, this is the position. But they understand the duplicity of the self-styled Tamil conscience keepers. Even today morning, just now, I was a little late. I was meeting one of the oldest maths in Western Tamil Nadu, 500-year-old math. Tamil, they have a Tamil college, which was one of the earliest colleges in Tamil Nadu. The math pontiff, senior leader, Swamiji was saying, he wholeheartedly welcomes this national education policy, because for the first time, Prime Minister Modi's government has announced this kind of policy through which, students can join Tamil from class 1. So they are all very, very happy. We are trying to make people understand this. So my congratulations to you. I have a few queries. I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kanak Sabapati ji. Yes, I'll just request Dr. Malini Bhattacharya to also make a few observations, and then we can give the concluding words to Professor Sridharji. Yes, Malini.
Namaste. Good evening to everyone. Can you hear me, Anirban sir? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. It is always a pleasure to listen to Dr. Sridhar. I've had the opportunity of meeting him on 2 occasions, and I learned enormously today, as I've done in earlier times. Thank you, Dr. Sridhar, for so clearly and succinctly outlining the most important features of the NEP. And today, I also speak not just as an independent, person who has, views of her own, but also as a representative of Azim Premji University, because we've had the privilege of being, very close partners or allies in the drafting of this policy. And though I myself have not been part of this exercise, but I've heard so much about this, from my colleagues who have participated in the process, including from our Vice Chancellor, Mr. Anurag Behar. And I think for us, the most important takeaway about the policy has been the larger inclusive and the consultative character of the process through which the policy has been drafted, which Dr. Sridhar has already talked about in his introductory remarks. But it's worthwhile to, I think, talk about it and write about it. And I don't think that has been done as much. Because I'm a political scientist by training, my focus or gaze is usually on the political dimension of any policy that is released by the government of India. And as always, I'm quite appalled by the larger politicization of the NEP that is taking place. One has to just go through the op-ed pieces and the kind of malicious and vicious, ways in which people are attacking the policy just for the heck of attacking it, right? And one of the things that has struck my attention is the claim by critics of the NEP that the NEP has a clear RSS imprint, right? And probably that because I work on the Sangh, that's something that continuously draws my attention. And I was quite appalled and even amused because I thought this was one policy that is a fantastic document, which is not only inclusive, which has not only tried to include every possible voice in society, number one. It is also a policy that after 34 years finally is in sync with the times that we are living in, right? So in a post globalized world, it pays due credence to the times that we are living in. So whether it is the design of the graduation program now, which has been extended to a 4-year program, it allows huge opportunities for our students to go abroad, carry out research soon after graduation, right? It's a huge rupture and a break from the previous traditional method whereby our students did not have as much flexibility to go outside the country soon after graduation. They did after post graduation. So that I think is fantastic. The second thing that I truly would like to applaud the drafters of the policy for is the fact that simple things like acknowledging the fact that data science is the future, right? So you have something as simple as coding being introduced in schools now. So children from the age of, from standard 6 will be introduced to, data coding, which I think is fantastic. Uh, Things such as, acknowledging interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinary nature of higher education, I think is another fantastic move. And finally, and there's so many good, more fantastic things, but I want to end with what I started with, which is to say that I think this is the first policy, according to me, the first education policy, which is completely rooted to the larger ethos of who we are as a country, who we are as a civilization, right? And I think instead of mudslinging and bringing out our own sort of petty political biases here, I think we should set these aside and get together to really congratulate this government and the people who've put this together to give us this policy, something that's finally, one can say with a lot of pride, is steeped in the Indian tradition. uh, so yeah, thank you so much, and I learned so much today. Thank you.
Malini, Dr. Malini, it is always a feast to listen to you. Huh? Very nice.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why
Very
I was
kind
delighted
words from you.
that always. So there's such clarity and incisiveness in her approach and in her articulation. So I'm extremely delighted, and I think if there's anything that Professor Sridhar would like to, in terms of concluding and say, then I would request him to say if any concluding words that he has.
See, I would like to this may look little personal note, but let me. See, one thing is, one extremely important confession I have to make here, because you're limited number and you have the kind of attitude that the government and the people in the system had toward the entire process. Not even a single iota of briefing to us. You please do like this. You please address like this. You please bring this dimension. You consider this. Nothing of that sort at any point of time. A. Second, I need to be thankful to the political system for their own. They kept us away, kind of, number one. No, I'm talking of the usual narrative that happens. Second thing is, actually, Saji Narayan sir is about bureaucracy. The political leadership ensured ourselves completely without any interference with the bureaucracy, except for the formal introduction, the entire functioning, the entire secretariat, it was completely given freedom to us. So we can take any kind of decision. And the secretary is the person of giving copies to the secretary, taking their views and things like that. So I feel this is a very, very critical issue that we need to make public and tell. One. The second thing is, Dr. Malini mentioned about the kind of consultative mechanism, etc. The second thing what I would like to say is, I think I can confess this, Anirbanji. See, many a time, in fact, not for public consumption, but for all very enlightened people, therefore I am able to say this. We had interaction with very important functionaries of our Parivar organization.
Should we stop the do you want us now to stop the Amit इसको अभी live को बंद कर सकते हैं
लाइव को बंद
हाँ लाइव को बंद कर सकते हैं हाँ अमित लाइव को बंद कर दीजिए
ऐसा कर दिया सर
ठीक है हाँ yes
I was trying to say